Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're logging in from today. Really appreciate everybody joining us for a corporate update and Q&A session from Contango or related to this morning's press release. So I'm joined today by the company's president and CEO, Rick Van Nieuwenhuyse, and their CFO, Mike Clark. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Romeo, good to see you again, and thanks for Six for hosting this, and to everybody out there, happy Thanksgiving weekend. Obviously, we wanted to put some news out today that was important from a timing perspective. We recently had a joint venture meeting with our partner Kinross, which gave us a new updated plan for 2025 and the life of mine plan. And so we wanted to get that news out as quickly as we could. We are still formulating information. Kinross is still processing information. But the bottom line is the mine plan really revolves around a reduction in bridge weights that was imposed by recently imposed by the state of Alaska, Department of Transportation. And it pertains to one particular bridge that's really kind of in the middle of the road route between mine site Manh Choh and the processing site at Fort Knox, the Chena River floodplain bridge, which happens to actually one of the newest bridges on the road route. So that reduction is basically resulting in a net 20% fewer tons that can be delivered, and thereby restricting the number of tons that can be delivered to the Fort Knox mill. So that's really what's driving the new revised plan. I shouldn't say it's revised; it's revised from what the original feasibility study plan was, but it now updated with the recent meeting we had with our joint venture partner. So we think it's a worst case scenario plan in the sense that this is new information. So we haven't tried to look at what other things can be done to help mitigate the reduction in tons. Kinross is working on that, and we think will certainly be updates on that as we go through the year here. But this was important information to get out to our shareholders, so we wanted to get it out. Apologies that it's through the Thanksgiving weekend, but that's how these things turn out. I'll stop there and just I think there'll be a lot of questions, and I think that's probably the best format to sort of address investors' questions and shareholders' questions that way. So, Romy, I'll turn it back to you to get to the questions. And Mike will join us here as well to help out with answering some of the questions.
No, I appreciate it very much, and thanks for that preamble. So here's how today's going to work. I do have a number of questions. A lot of them have been submitted in advance over email, but also on the boards. So I'm going to run through those, and then this is a live event, so please do in the chat give any additional questions, and we'll work through those as available afterwards. If for whatever reason we don't get to your question today, I'm going to make sure the Contango team gets them, send them the full chat transcript, so I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But we'll try to get to as many as we can today. And the replay for this video will be available probably by 5 Eastern today, so relatively early following the event. But let me get into some questions. So like I said, a lot of these came in over email in advance. First, I'm curious what, if any, specific changes to the repayment schedules are being sought by Contango right now.
Yeah, Mike, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, no, so we are in discussions with our lenders, and it was always kind of expected that every time you update the mine plan and each year going into the following year, we would revisit the hedges and the principal repayments with the lenders to make sure they matched up appropriately to the revised plan. Because, the original repayment plan was always based on the feasibility, and, things always change slightly. So it's intended to, my first objective is just to kind of push things out by 2 months for each principal repayment and hedge, which more or less solves any kind of cash shortage for 2025. So that's what we're working on. It'll take a little bit of time, but they're aware, and we're working with them as we speak.
Great, thank you. On to the bridge weight limits, because I know a lot of people had questions about those. One is, are the weight limits temporary, seasonal, or permanent? Just so people can get a better understanding of what we're looking at.
Yeah, so they're I'm not sure exactly. They're done on a regular basis. The state of Alaska looks at all the weight limits on all the bridges throughout the state on a regular basis. I think it's probably in the neighborhood of once a year, and it goes along with an overall Department of Transportation plan for maintaining Alaska's highways, and of course the bridges are a principal part of that. So it's something that can change in the future, and so there's certainly scope for that to change. I mean, a bridge has an expected life of useful life, and so these weight limits are a reflection of that lifespan. So if that changes for some reason, if there's new funding that gets put into the budget to address that, then that can change what the weight limits are.
Okay, great. So there are potential for additional changes to the bridge's weight limits in the future.
I think so. Yes. I mean, I think there's a number of things that I know for that the DOT had in its plan to update the Chena Bridge. So that's something that still could be done in the future.
Okay. No, thank you. One question. This is a tough one, but a couple people asked it, so I thought I'd throw it to you guys. Which is, could this have been foreseen really in any way beforehand?
And I'll take that. No, I don't. I think not really at all. It's just these are annual reviews that the state of Alaska DOT does, and again, we didn't really have any sort of heads up on the weight limits. That's relatively recent and very recent, and then the implications are the other thing. So once you get the weight limits, you have to go through and this is obviously Ken Ross as the manager is doing this and understanding what the effects are going to be on the overall mine plan going forward. And again, I think I said earlier on, I think when Ken Ross first gets this information, they're going to take a very conservative view, and I think that's the right view to take. And then you're going to look at mitigation strategies. What can we do to change things and adjust things as to make the mine plan more effective from a transportation standpoint.
Right. There's a couple people asked this. How does this impact Manh Choh's mine life?
Actually, it'll extend it. I mean, if you're delivering fewer tons over a set number of tons of ore, then obviously it's going to extend it. And previous mine plan went to 28, and this one's now going to go to 29. So, that's just a consequence of a fixed number of tons being delivered.
Right. And Mike, I got kind of a follow-up on AISC numbers. So guidance is that life of mine AISC is estimated at about 1,400, but next year's appears higher, 2025 at 1,625, I think. Yes. Can you just clarify for folks in the audience what's going on there?
Yeah, no. So, when we got the updated kind of numbers from Kinross, they updated for the life of mine, and that included the truck restrictions, which drove up the AISC. And what really happens is next year there's less tons being delivered, less ounces being produced. AISC is a function of the number of ounces sold at the end of the year, and so your denominator comes down, but your costs are relatively fixed. And so next year, just due to the timing of the mine plan, how many ounces are being produced, and the relatively fixed cost nature of production, your AISC goes up higher than the life of mine. But in later years of the mine life, when we're producing far more ounces, we're going to have a much lower AISC. So you're going to have some this year, next year's at 1,600, but then later years it's going to be lower than 1,400, and it all averages out to that amount. Okay, and these are estimates, and we've had to put these together quickly, but we're pretty confident with these numbers. And as Rick said, I think these are conservative, and we'll look to hopefully improve.
Awesome. No, appreciate that clarification. I know a number of people had asked. But up next is the question that most people asked. I got text, emails, etc. And that's, does this impact the trucking model or the estimates for any other Contango projects, or for Lucky Shot or for Johnson Tract?
Yeah, absolutely not. The bridge, the specific bridge in play here is between the Manh Choh site and the Fort Knox site along the Alaska Highway and the Richardson Highway specifically. So, short answer is no. At Lucky Shot, we're looking at using rail to transport ore, and not necessarily to Fort Knox. Just we've got other options there. And then Johnson Tract, of course, that's we're looking at more of a marine barge access there. So Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it, very relevant to the discussion today, but absolutely not.
Great. No, I appreciate it. Like I said, a lot of people asked, so appreciate that clarification. One is a bit technical, but I'm curious, is will Contango mitigate the increase in wet ore by dewatering the excavation or stockpiling ore on site to allow moisture to gravity drain before shipping?
Yeah, the moisture thing is was not something that was anticipated in the feasibility study to the degree that it has been a factor. There have been some. I don't think at Manh Choh we can do anything to adjust moisture. We had a very wet year this year, and that's a consequence of that. I think at Fort Knox there might be some things to cover, to cover the stockpiles there to keep the moisture down to a limit, or limit the amount of moisture there that it takes place while the stockpile sits at Fort Knox.
Great. No, appreciate that. This is one question, and I don't know the degree to which you can answer it, but it's how long before the Alaska Highway Department replaces the obsolete bridges between Manh Choh and Fairbanks, and how long were bridge conditions known to the State Highway Department?
So the first question, in terms of how long these will last, I think we kind of answered that before. The State of Alaska Department of Transportation, I think, looks at these on a regular basis, and again, don't quote me on this, but I think it's roughly annually. So that's the plan we have in front of us. And I should emphasize, this applies to all trucks, all trucks on the highway. It's not singling out ore trucks at all. It's all trucks. So this has a consequence to people getting their groceries and everything else in Alaska, because pretty much everything goes up that highway and across that bridge. So it's I'm sure the State of Alaska DOT is looking at that because, as I said, everything in Alaska, in interior Alaska, Fairbanks and the surrounding area, pretty much comes across that bridge. So it's an important thing for the economy of the state. So I think DOT will be looking at that closely.
Great. Next one, it involves a bit of napkin math, but really curious in your perspective. And that's, if nothing changes in the conditions identified in the press release this morning, what spot gold price would be required to eliminate this projected impact to cash flow?
That's probably a tough question. I'm probably going to ask Mike to see if he can put some parameters around that, because it's a bit of a touchy. It's a bit hard to manage that, putting a number on something. But Mike, help me out here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thumb suck. We model everything in the press release, and currently what we use in all of our internal models is $2,500. With for the next 2 years, we are hedged, and I'm being a little more aggressive in the delivery now. So most 80% of our gold's going into the hedge, leaving only, or 75%, sorry, is going into the hedges, of 25 going selling at spot. So if gold goes up to $3,000, we're gonna benefit, $125 or whatever on that. And that's going to help our bottom line. But it's a little tough to know, and I think we still need to do more work. We need to kind of finalize, what we're gonna defer on the lender side from a principal and if any hedges. But I think if we get this, if gold goes up to $3,000, I think most of this pain will go away.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. There's one question that came in over email that's reflected by Danny in the chat. So Danny, let me know if this covers your question. But it's really, will Contango need to revise the projected timelines to develop Lucky Shot and Johnson Tract based on this news?
Yeah, I think the fair answer to that is, once we get the things lined out with our lenders, I've always said the first order of our business is to pay back the debt. So that is the first thing we're going to address here is working out a payback schedule with our lenders, and then we'll address and look at what we can afford to do at both Lucky Shot and Johnson Tract. I think that's a fair way to look at it. So it's kind of a stay tuned kind of an answer, I guess.
Great. This one I think is probably for Mike, but either of you can answer. And that's this came in a couple of emails. Do you foresee any need for further dilution based on this news?
Mike, you want to go or you want me to go?
You can start and I can fill in.
Yeah, again, it's a bit of a repeat answer in the sense of, the first order of business is to sit down with our bankers and work out, a repayment schedule of the debt. That's the most important thing. I mean, we're still generating a fair bit of cash flow here, right? I mean, with delivering 60,000 ounces of gold, we're going to generate $50 million of free cash flow. So there's a lot to work with here. We just have to sit down with our lenders and work it out.
Yeah, and we have some time here as well. We're not in a rush, and we're still in production for campaign 3 right now, throwing off lots of gold. So I think in Q1 we'll have everything kind of finalized with the lenders, if not sooner, and then work towards coming up with a strategy going forward.
Great, appreciate that. Couple questions still in the chat that haven't been addressed and what we've already gone through. This one I think we've touched on, but CSAM asks, do you know the current expected lifespan of the bridge based on their most recent guidance?
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have the answer to that. And I'm not sure that they actually publicize that, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. M.A. Pelletier asked from the chat, is adding smaller and lighter trucks an option, so more trips for the same tons?
Yeah, I think the general answer I'd have there is those are all things that Kinross as manager will be looking at to look at the mitigation. Are there mitigation strategies that can work for getting us back to something closer to our original expected mine plan. Again, and the original here is the feasibility study. So that always continues to be sort of the base case, if you will. And when you have a feasibility study, as soon as you have your first year of production, you're going to adjust it as you know things. This new thing that we know now with the limitation on the bridge is, I say, it's brand new. So it kind of it impacted what was originally planned versus what we're now going to be able to do. And again, I would characterize it as a bit of a worst case scenario in the sense that you get new information, you have to, and it coincides with our year end when we normally have a joint venture meeting to say, oh hey, here's our new plan. And so definitely there was a fair bit of work going on in the last little bit here since our joint venture meeting.
Oh, great. One question, this is speaking of mitigation strategy, somebody in the chat asks, why not just fix the bridge or offer to assist in fixing the bridge?
Maybe that's one thing that Kinross will take a look at. I honestly don't know. I think it's that's a DOT, that's their directive, and it's part of an overall plan for the state of Alaska. So those are all things that I think probably can and should be taken a look at.
Great. Somebody asked, Aiden from the chat, is it possible for management to work closer with government on weight limit restrictions to understand the engineering parameters and what they expect to occur over the following years?
Yeah, and I expect all those discussions to be taking place, between Kinross as manager again of the joint venture and DOT, and there are lots of details, I'm sure, sort of behind just here's the number that you can work with, and again, just getting this information. There's lots of questions that we have and that Kinross has that we're working on to see if there are mitigating responses to, mitigating answers to.
Makes sense.
As I said earlier, just to comment on that, this bridge and these weight restrictions aren't limited to us. They're across the board. So everybody's groceries, everybody's fuel, everything that comes across that bridge means that they can bring less of it in a truckload, and therefore is more expensive.
Yeah, that's how that works. One question from Kyle Holmes in the chat. Do you expect Kinross to release an updated reserve report from Manh Choh anytime soon?
I think we will, but when we get one, then so far, as I just mentioned the feasibility study, that is still the base plan in terms of reserves, and I don't believe we haven't given. There's been no indication that we're going to get an update to that anytime soon. And again, that's the manager that's in charge of that, and so. I think that kind of reading between the lines there is that they don't really see a huge change. It's just as Mike's described, this weight limit has caused a change in the plan that we can deliver for 2025, but the overall life of mine plan in terms of ounces, tons, and grade are the same, if that makes sense.
It's changing schedule. No, yeah. Speaking of mitigation strategies, somebody in the chat, it's one of those interesting questions. I don't know if you have a perspective on it. He says, why not just drop a trailer on one side of the bridge and then pick it up on the other side of the bridge with another truck running the drop trailer across the bridge? He says this happens relatively frequently to avoid pinch points.
And I'll not being a transportation expert, I will say I'm confident that Kinross will be looking at a number of mitigating strategies to try and get us, back to closer to where the original plan was.
Appreciate that. There's one question I think this might be for Mike. Dan asked the 50 million cash flow, that's pre-settling the hedges, is that correct?
Correct.
Right. There's one question on the Johnson Tract PEA. When is that expected to be released? And can you give any guidance to shareholders in the interim on this call on what that report might look like?
Yeah, won't give any guidance on it at this point, but I think it's going to be ready for the public in early in Q1 2025. Just kind of looking at where we are today with we've got I'd say about half of the information complete, and the other half is not complete, and we still need to review it in detail. So I think early 2025 is good guidance.
Appreciate that. Now it looks like we're through the live questions. Give people an opportunity to ask one more, but in the meantime, Rick, I'll throw it to you for just final words, people heading out.
Yeah, no, appreciate again everybody taking time out of their Thanksgiving long weekend, at least to the Americans. Stay tuned. There'll be more information that we'll update you as we get it from Kinross as the manager of the Peak Gold joint venture. I'm sure they're working hard to figure out how to mitigate the transportation plan to get us back closer to where the original plan was in terms, and again, that original plan being sort of referenced back to the feasibility study. Obviously, this is an important project for Kinross, so this is something they're working on hard, and we certainly had a pretty good and open discussion with them. It is all recent information, so I think everybody just needs to be a little bit patient to understand what it means for 2025. What are the mitigation opportunities that might be there. And then we'll, as we get more information, we can obviously provide that more guidance for 2025, but then also the rest of the life of mine.
Appreciate it. Rick, Mike, thanks so much for coming on so soon after the press release. Not everybody does that, so very kind of you. And folks in the audience, thanks for joining us today. If you do think of any additional questions, shoot them in, and I'll make sure the Contango team gets them as soon as possible. But thank you very much, and have a great Thanksgiving weekend for the Americans.
Thank you.